The loudest sound in the Bible wasn't the creation of the universe. It wasn't the walls of Jericho falling. It was the sound of a door slamming shut. Genesis 7:16 says God shut the door. 1 second, the door was open and the world was partying. The next second, the door was sealed and the world was doomed. There was no countdown. There was no siren. There was just too late. Jesus said our world today looks exactly like their world did 5 minutes before the scream. Look around you. Are we living in the timeline or are we living in the deadline? Because the rain isn't the problem. The silence is. Jesus gave us a warning that chills the bone. He didn't mention wars. He didn't mention plagues. He talked about dinner parties. As it was in the days of Noah, look at them. The food is hot. The wine is vintage. They aren't looking at the sky in fear. They are looking at each other in admiration. A groom whispers promises of forever to a bride who believes they have all the time in the world. A merchant counts his silver, stacking coins like little walls against reality. It is a world so efficient, so busy, and so comfortable that it forgot it was mortal. This is the trap of normalcy, the most dangerous anesthetic known to man. It whispers that judgment is a fairy tale for children, that tomorrow is guaranteed. They were so in love with their immediate pleasure, so distracted by the noise of their own success, that they missed the sound of the universe shifting gears. They were arguing about the price of tea, while the dam was breaking just over the hill. Look closely. Does this feel distant, or does it feel familiar? We are more connected than they ever were, yet infinitely more distracted. We trade clay tablets for glass screens, but the blindness is identical. The text says they knew nothing, not because Noah wasn't screaming, but because they chose not to listen. Their civilization wasn't a primitive tribe. It was a machine of malice that looks hauntingly like the city outside your window right now. Erase the picture of the caveman from your mind. Genesis 4 introduces us to Tubal Cain, the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. This wasn't a primitive tribe huddled around a campfire. This was a machine. Look at the skyline. Chimneys scraping the smog-filled sky. The air smells of sulfur and ambition. The sound isn't birdsong. It's the rhythmic, grinding noise of industry. A civilization obsessed with building monuments to its own glory. They had art. They had music. Jubal was the father of the harp and flute. But listen to the melody. It's not worship. It's a trance. A heavy, hypnotic rhythm designed to drown out the conscience. In the center of the room stands Lamech. He isn't wearing animal skins. He is draped in purple and gold. He holds a cup in one hand and a fresh sword in the other. He sings his song, the first recorded poem in the Bible, and it's a song about murder. I have killed a man for wounding me, he boasts. If Cain is avenged sevenfold, and Lamech 77-fold, the crowd cheers. They toast to brutality. This is the heartbeat of the days of Noah. It wasn't just that they sinned. We all sin. It was the absence of remorse. In the market, coins don't change hands peacefully. If you want the apple, you take it. If the vendor objects, you break in. No one screams for the police. There are no police. The strong devour the weak, and the weak are erased. Violence isn't an event here. It is the atmosphere. It is the air they breathe. God looked down at this masterpiece of human achievement and saw a cancer. Every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Imagine a world with zero restraint, no guilt, no shame, just pure, unadulterated appetite. They built a paradise of iron and blood, and they thought God was either blind or dead. But in the silence of the wilderness, far from the noise of the foundries, a countdown clock was about to start. Then the noise stopped. God spoke. It wasn't a thunderclap that shook the city walls. If it were, Lamech would have bowed. It was a whisper, directed at the only man listening. My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. God set a timer. Think about the terrifying precision of that math. Not someday, not soon. 120 years. It was a grace period, a final, long exhale of mercy before the inhalation of judgment. God was giving the world 3 generations to wake up, but to the world, the sky looked exactly the same. The sun rose, the sun set. The invisible clock had started ticking, but only Noah could hear the gears turning. Then came the instruction. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. We read this quickly, but stop. Feel the weight of it. Noah wasn't a shipbuilder. He lived miles from the nearest ocean. God didn't ask for a raft. He asked for a vessel the size of a modern battleship. 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high. This wasn't a boat. It was a floating warehouse. A survival bunker designed to withstand a planetary collapse. Noah stood in the dust, looking at his rough hands. He had no power tools. He had no cranes. He had no crew, just 3 sons. Logic screamed, impossible. Experience screamed, insane. Faith whispered, start. The first cut is always the hardest. When Noah swung that axe, he wasn't just cutting wood. He was cutting ties with society. Thwack! The sound echoed through the valley. It was the first note of a 120-year sermon. Imagine the neighbors passing by. What are you building, Noah? An ark. What is an ark? A shelter for the rain. Rain? What is rain? There is no record of rain before the flood. The earth was watered by mists from the ground. Noah was preparing for a disaster that had no name. He was betting his reputation, his fortune, and his life on a weather forecast from God. 10 years passed. Nothing happened. 50 years passed. The sky was still blue. 80 years passed. Can you feel the crushing weight of the delay? This is where most of us would quit. We can handle a week of faith. Maybe a month, but a century? Every morning, Noah woke up with aching joints. Every morning, he looked at the cloudless horizon. The doubt must have been a constant companion. Did I hear correctly? Am I just a crazy old man dragging my family into a delusion? But then he would look at the wickedness in the city. He would see the darkness in men's eyes, and he would pick up the hammer. He need rain to prove God was right. He saw the storm in the human heart. The ark became a monument to stupidity. It was the joke of the century. Travelers would detour just to see Noah's folly. They set up picnics in the shadow of the hull. They carved their names into the timber. Look at him, they jeered. The man who thinks he can float on dust. They didn't hate him. They pitied him. To them, he was a tragic figure, a man wasting his life on a phantom fear. They didn't know that the shadow of the ark was the only safe place on earth. They stood in the shadow of salvation and used it to shade their eyes while they mocked the Savior. 119 years? The clock was almost at midnight. Then came the command that broke all human logic. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. We gloss over this. We imagine a cute little boat with a giraffe sticking out of the chimney. But the dimensions God gave 300 cubits long, 50 wide, 30 high, describe a floating warehouse, a structure with the displacement of a modern battleship. And Noah had to build it in a desert. Imagine the absurdity. He is laying the keel for a titan of the seas in a place where the ground cracks from thirst. He is preparing for an ocean and a world that barely knows what a river is. This wasn't just a construction project. It was a public declaration of insanity. He was staking his life on a hazard that had no precedent in planetary history. There were no cranes, no power tools, no hydraulic lifts. Every beam of gopher wood-dense, iron-hard timber had to be felled, dragged, and hoisted by muscle. Look at Noah's back. It's bent. It's scarred. Faith isn't always a warm feeling in the chest. Often, it's a blister on the hand. For decades, the only sound in the valley was the grunt of men and the strike of the axe. Thwack, thwack. While the city developed music and metallurgy, Noah developed calluses. He was building a coffin for the world, hoping it would be a cradle for the future. The sheer caloric deficit, the exhaustion, the nights waking up with cramping muscles. This was the hidden cost of holiness. The instructions were specific. Cover it with pitch inside and out. Noah wasn't just building a shape. He was engineering survival. He knew that whatever was coming would be violent. He sealed every joint. He waterproofed every gap with a sticky, black, foul-smelling tar. Why? Because God didn't promise to keep the water out miraculously. He told Noah to build the protection himself. This is the partnership of faith. God provides the warning, man provides the work. Noah spent years covered in black tar, looking like a madman, smelling of chemicals and sweat. While the men of the city perfumed themselves with imported oils, Noah waterproofed his family against the judgment. And the hardest part? The sky. Every morning for 120 years, Noah woke up to a sunrise that mocked him. Clear, blue, dry. Where is this flood, Noah? His own mind must have whispered, where is this water that falls from above? To build a ship for a century without seeing a single drop of rain requires a psychological fortitude we can to comprehend. That is over 43,000 mornings of perfect weather, each one arguing against his mission. He was fighting the evidence of his eyes with the evidence of his ears. He chose to believe the voice over the view. And as the massive skeleton of the ark rose, it cast a long, strange shadow over the valley. A shadow that grew longer as the deadline approached. Two structures defined the horizon of the ancient world. The city of Cain, a monument of iron, bronze, and human pride, reaching up to challenge the heavens with smoke and fire. And the Ark of Noah, a humble box of wood and pitch, crouching low to survive the heavens. One was built to make a name. The other was built to save a life. The city was loud, filled with the clang of industry and the songs of Lamech. The construction site was quiet, filled only with the breathing of four men working against time. The world looked at the city and saw the future. Noah looked at the city and saw a graveyard. As the ark grew, so did the crowd. But they didn't come to repent. They came to be entertained. The construction site became the ancient world's greatest joke, a tourist attraction for the cynical. Families would travel from the city of bronze just to see Noah's folly. They set up picnics in the shadow of the hull, drinking wine and watching the old man sweat. They carved their names into the timber, leaving graffiti on the vessel of their own salvation. Look at him, they jeered. The old fool who thinks he can float on dust. They turned the warning of God into a meme. It wasn't just disbelief. It was aggressive delight in his humiliation. They drank their wine and toasted to the madman of the valley, unaware that they were standing in the shadow of the only object that would exist in a month's time. And then there were the intellectuals. Lamech, the ruler of the age, didn't just mock. He argued. He represented the science of the day. Noah, he would say, smoothing his gold rings with a patronizing smile. Look at the data. It has never rained. The mist comes from the ground. Your flood is scientifically impossible. He used logic to dismantle faith. He used the consistency of the past to disprove the catastrophe of the future. Everything continues as it has since the beginning of creation, they said. It was a convincing argument. If you looked at the data, Noah was wrong. But Noah knew something the data couldn't show. The moral law of gravity. When sign reaches a tipping point, judgment falls, regardless of the weather forecast. The mockery eventually turned to hatred. Why? Because holiness is offensive to corruption. Noah's silent obedience was a judgment on their noisy rebellion. They started throwing stones, not big enough to kill, but big enough to bruise. They spat on the wood he was trying to sanctify. "Stop scaring our children with your doomsday stories." They screamed. Noah became the enemy of the public peace, a conspiracy theorist disturbing the social order. His sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth must have burned with rage. They were strong men. They could have fought back, but Noah held them back. "We fight with hammers," he whispered, wiping the spittle from his face. "Not swords. We build. That is how we answer." We forget the social cost. For 120 years, Noah's family was uninvited. No weddings, no funerals, no banquets. They were the outcasts, the cult in the desert. Imagine the pressure on Noah's wife. Imagine the pressure on the daughters-in-law, leaving their families behind to marry into this crazy clan. To stay faithful when the entire culture, every artist, every leader, every scientist says you are wrong is a crushing burden. They sat by their small fire, listening to the music of the city drift on the wind. The world was having a party to celebrate its own funeral, and the 8 of them sat in the dark, waiting for a guest that no one else believed was coming. 2 Peter 2-5 calls Noah a preacher of righteousness. He didn't just build, he spoke. For 120 years, the doors of the construction site were open. Anyone could have picked up a hammer. Anyone could have asked for a seat. God didn't limit the passenger list. The people did. Noah surely pleaded with them. Just come inside, just in case. But the human heart is hard. They loved their sin more than their survival. They looked at the ark and saw a prison. They looked at the city and saw freedom. They didn't know that in a few days, the city would be a tomb, and the prison would be the only freedom left. Then, the mockery turned to confusion. It started in the wild places, in the deep forests and the scorching deserts. A vibration began in the ground frequency that human ears couldn't hear, but every nervous system in the animal kingdom was tuned to. God didn't hurt them. He called them. Suddenly, the killing stopped. The food chain was suspended. The lion abandoned its kill. The wolf ignored the lamb. The bear walked past the hive. They were seized by a compulsion stronger than hunger. A silent, eerie army began to move across the landscape, drawn by a magnetic pull toward the only wooden structure in the valley. Imagine standing on the walls of the city of Cain. You look down and see the impossible. Thousands of beasts marching in perfect rhythm, predators walking beside prey, venomous snakes slithering beside rodents without striking. It wasn't cute. It was terrifying. It was a suspension of the laws of nature. The animals were testifying. They knew what the humans refused to believe. The ground was about to break. While the scientists of the city debated the probability of rain, the instincts of the animals screamed, "Run!" Nature bowed its knee to the Creator, while the beings made in His image stood tall in their arrogance. This was the final warning. A neon sign from heaven flashing danger. But look at the human reaction. Cognitive dissonance. When you see a miracle that contradicts your lifestyle, you have 2 choices: repent or rationalize. They chose to rationalize. "It's a trick," Lamech shouted. "The old man is using sorcery to control them." "It's a migration anomaly," the scholars argued. "A magnetic shift." They explained away the supernatural, because acknowledging it would mean admitting they were wrong. They watched the animals enter the safety they refused. They chose to die smart rather than live humble. For 7 days, the procession continued. The ark swallowed them up. The birds filled the rafters. The creeping things filled the lower decks. The logistics were divine. Noah didn't have to capture them. He just had to open the door. It was a somber event. There was no joy in it. It was an evacuation. The noise of the animals settled into a low, vibrating hum inside the ship, the sound of life being packed away for safekeeping. Outside, the valley was empty again. The dust settled, and the ark stood silent, fully loaded, waiting for its captain. Then came the moment of final separation. The ramp was clear. Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their 3 wives. 8 people. That was the sum total of righteousness on planet Earth. Billions of people outside. 8 inside. The ratio is terrifying. Noah looked back one last time. He looked at the market where he bought grain. He looked at the faces of the mockers who were still watching him. Did he weep? Did he want to scream? We don't know. But we know he didn't turn back. He stepped across the threshold. He traded the wide, open world for a wooden box. He traded freedom for safety. And as his foot hit the floorboards of the ark, the time of the Gentiles was over. And then, the most terrifying verse in the Bible occurred. Genesis 7:16. And the Lord shut him in. Noah didn't close the door. He couldn't. The mechanism was too heavy, the significance too great. This was a divine act. Visualize the moment. A wind from heaven. An invisible hand pushing against the weight of the massive gopher wood. Slam. The sound must have been like a thunderclap, echoing off the canyon walls. It wasn't just a door closing. It was an eerie ending. At that exact millisecond, the age of mercy expired and the age of judgment began. The separation was absolute. Inside, life; outside, death. There was no handle on the inside. Noah couldn't open it even if he wanted to. God sealed the breach. The people outside heard the boom. They jumped. Their hearts surely skipped a beat. But then, the sun kept shining. The birds kept flying. So they laughed. Look, they shouted, raising their wine cups. The old fool has trapped himself in his coffin. Come on, Noah. It's a beautiful day. They banged on the wood, not in fear, but in mockery. They didn't realize that the door wasn't locked to keep Noah in. It was locked to keep them out. They were standing on the wrong side of the seal, and they were celebrating their own execution. They had 120 years to walk through that open door. Now, not even a whisper could get through. Inside, the darkness was sudden and total. The only light came from flickering oil lamps. The air smelled of straw, animal fur, and tar. This wasn't a cruise ship. It was a survival bunker. And then began the test that no one talks about. The rain didn't start immediately. Read the text. And after 7 days, the floodwaters came on the earth. 7 days. Imagine the psychological torture. Noah is sitting in the dark, listening to the jeers outside. Day 1 passes. Sunshine. Day 2 passes. Blue skies. Day 3 passes. The crowd outside is having a party, roasting meat, screaming insults at the wood. Can you imagine the conversation inside the ark on day 5? Father, are we sure? Did we just lock ourselves in a box for nothing? The neighbors are right. It's sunny outside. Those 7 days were the final fire to refine their faith. It's easy to believe when the rain is falling. It's hard to believe when the sun is shining and you look like an idiot. God was testing them. He was stripping away every shred of reliance on sight. They had to sit in the stench and the dark, holding on to a promise that looked like a lie. They had to wait and wait. Then came the evening of the 7th day. The laughter outside started to falter. Why? Because the air changed. The barometric pressure plummeted. A static charge filled the air, making hair stand on end. The sky didn't just turn gray. It turned a bruised, violent purple. The birds stopped flying. The wind stopped blowing. A silence fell over the city of Cain, a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. Lamech looked up from his wine cup. The smile vanished. Inside the ark, Noah felt it too. The wait was over. The 7th day ended, and the world broke. Genesis doesn't say it started to sprinkle. It says, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth. This wasn't weather. This was geology. The tectonic plates of the earth shattered. Superheated water from the mantle exploded upward with the force of 1,000 nuclear warheads. The ground beneath the city of Cain split. The bronze foundries, The temples of pride, the markets of greed, they didn't just flood, they disintegrated. The laughter outside the ark didn't fade away slowly. It was cut off instantly by the roar of the apocalypse. The argument was over. The debate was settled. Then, the windows of heaven were opened. The atmospheric canopy collapsed. It wasn't rain. It was a vertical ocean. Imagine the shock. These people had never seen a storm. Now the sky was falling on their heads. The expensive silk robes were instantly soaked heavy and cold. The gold coins were dropped in the mud. Priorities shifted in a microsecond. The career, the reputation, the political arguments, it all evaporated. There was only one thought left in the mind of every man, woman, and child. The old man was right. Panic is a terrible thing to watch. The mob rushed the ark. 10 minutes ago, they were throwing stones at it. Now, they were clawing at it. Noah, open up. Noah, we believe you now. For the love of God, open the door. Fingernails scratching against the pitch-covered wood. Fathers lifting their children above the rising waves, screaming for mercy. Inside, Noah must have heard them. The screams of his neighbors. The people he had traded with. The people he had warned. Did he run to the door? Did he try to lift the latch? It didn't matter. God had sealed it. And God does not renegotiate judgment once the gavel has fallen. The water rose higher, rapidly, violently. The screams were silenced. The banging stopped. The ark groaned under the stress of the waves. It pitched and rolled, a tiny speck in a chaotic universe. Inside, the family held onto the beams, praying in the dark. But the wood held. The pitch held. The design of the architect was flawless. Outside, civilization was gone. The music, the art, the violence, the pride erased. There was no rich, no poor, no famous, no obscure. There were only two categories of humans left on the planet, those in the ark and the dead. Jesus said, they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. They were taken away. Their plans, their dreams, their next week canceled. They delayed their decision until the decision was made for them. The tragedy isn't just that they died. The tragedy is that they died just inches from salvation. They touched the wood of the ark. They heard the voice of the preacher. They were so close, but close is not in. And then, silence. Noah stepped out into a rebooted planet. The cities were gone. The noise was gone. The mockers were gone. He smelled the wet earth. He was the father of a new humanity, but he carried the ghost of the old one in his memory. He looked at the empty horizon. It was a fresh start, but the cost was absolute. He knew something we often forget. God is love, yes, but God is also a consuming fire. He keeps his promises, including the scary ones. Then God signed the treaty, a spectrum of light cut through the dark, gray clouds, the rainbow. We paint it on nursery walls. We use it for logos. We think it's cute, but in the ancient world, a bow was a weapon of war. God hung his war bow in the clouds unstrung, pointing away from the earth. It was a promise. Never again will I destroy all flesh with water. But read the fine print. He specified the weapon. With water, he didn't say judgment was over. He said the method would change. The Apostle Peter tells us the other half of the story. The world of that time was deluged and destroyed. By the same word, the present heavens and earth are reserved for fire. The next cleansing won't be a flood. It will be a furnace. Look around you. The violence, the distraction, the corruption, the celebration of self. We aren't evolving. We are just reliving Genesis 6 with better technology. We are building higher towers, louder music, and harder hearts. Lamech is still singing his song of pride on our screens. The days of Noah aren't history. They are the morning news. But here is the good news. The ark was never just a boat. It was a picture, a blueprint of being hidden in God when the wrath comes. Today, we don't need gopher wood. We don't need pitch. The ark has a name. His name is Jesus. He is the shelter that can withstand the fire. And unlike Noah's ark, which had room for only a few, this ark has room for everyone who wants to enter. But the dynamic is the same. There is a window of grace, and there is a deadline. The door is open right now. You can walk in. You can bring your family. But just like in Noah's day, no one knows when the clock strikes 0. It could be in 100 years. It could be tonight. Don't be like the crowd outside. Don't wait for the first drop of rain or the first spark of fire to believe in the storm. The evidence is all around us. The warning has been given. The ark is ready. Get in before the door shuts. The wood of the ark rotted away thousands of years ago, but the warning is fresher than tomorrow's headlines. We are busy building our own little empires of sand, ignoring the tide coming in. So here is the question you need to answer before you put your phone down. If the door shut tonight, which side would you be on? Noah didn't survive because he was perfect. He survived because he was prepared. He survived because when God spoke, he moved. We are digging into the deepest, hardest truths of the Bible every single week on this channel. We refuse to sleep while the world burns if you want to keep your eyes open while the rest of the culture is sleepwalking. Hit that subscribe button right now. Don't do it to support an algorithm. Do it to sharpen your own spirit. The rain is coming. The fire is coming. But so is the king. Be ready